All right, so I'm going to do this as like a stream of conscious thing because I think that's the best way to tell this story. So here's the context to this story. Prior to the pandemic happening, I was a college student in Los Angeles and Hollywood, and I was living in a dorm that was can be best described as living in a hotel room, and my bed was about 4 inches apart from this other guy. So, real tiny place. A fair amount of people were living in this building, one kitchen for all of us. So, this particular individual that I'm going to be telling this story about, my only experience with him prior to this is I was talking on the phone in the hallway to one of my friends, and he comes up to me and he's like, "Hey, man, I'm sorry if my music's too loud and is like bothering you." And at this point, I haven't heard a fucking thing. Like, I have no idea what this guy is talking about, and I'm like, "Okay, yeah, no, man, no worries about it. Like, I'm not really sweating it, no big deal." And he then walks into his room and proceeds to blast EDM music so loud I could actually hear it inside my dorm when I went back into it and finished the phone conversation. And I lived 3 doors down and across the hall. So we're talking loud. And that was my only interaction with this individual prior to this. So now what happened with this guy that makes this story so interesting? So it's 4:30 in the morning and I am passed out. I am like in a cold sleep. And all of a sudden I just hear all of this banging down the hallway and like it's two people like having a loud conversation. I don't really remember what it's about. It's been so long, but I just remember they were like mildly arguing and then they just fell into the door of my dorm and it very clearly woke me up. And I was already kind of annoyed. And, I can hear them screaming like and having like this argument. And I don't remember exactly what they were saying, but I remember that it was about like religion and faith and existentialism. And it's getting loud enough to the point where I'm starting to get a little pissed. And I started to like get out of bed because I'm going to go bang on their door and be like, "Hey, shut the fuck up. It's 4:30 in the morning." And, I could tell these guys were high on some shit, maybe meth, coke, I don't know. It was definitely something more than weed and alcohol. It was something because this was just a weird convo at a very weird hour, and you could just hear that they were very, very hyper. And as I get up to go do that, I start hearing the guy screaming, "Say it! Say there is a God! Tell me there's a God!" Like, I just start hearing that, and I'm like, what the fuck? And as I get closer to it, I start hearing this dude just fucking wail on him, screaming all the while, "Say it! Say there's a God! Say there's a God!" And then the dude starts screaming, "Help, help, help, he's breaking my leg, help." And then I hear like the slapping sounds of punching as I get closer to the door, as the guy starts yelling Hail Marys while he's punching this fucking dude and maybe stepping on his leg. I'm really not sure. But I'm just hearing like slapping sounds and "Hail Mary, full of grace. Hail Mary, full of grace." And it is just the wildest shit ever. So I tell my roommate, like, "Go get security. Like, I'm not dealing with this shit. Like, these guys are on something." So he goes and gets security. And, I'm assuming security is going to like just open the door, break it up, and tell him to fuck off. And what the funniest part to me is at this point, only when the guy started screaming about the broken leg is when people actually started coming out of their dorm, which is kind of funny to me because like this is probably a 5-minute screaming match that went on before the dude started punching him. And I'm like, how the hell did nobody get upset about it before I did? And, so security finally shows up and he walks up to the door and he just starts politely knocking on the door. Meanwhile, this dude is still kicking his ass and yelling Hail Marys. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on now? And he looks at me and he's like, "Oh, well, I forgot my key, so I have to go back down to the front desk." Mind you, my roommate has told him, "Hey, there's like 2 guys getting in a fist fight in their room at 4:30 in the morning," and it woke me up. And he didn't bring the fucking keys with him. So he goes back down, gets the keys. I go back to bed because I'm like, fuck this. It's 4:30 in the morning. I'm fucking tired. I'm not dealing with this shit. But the last thing I hear before I finally fall back asleep is that, like, he called the cops and the cops showed up. So, next morning goes by, and I see the guy walking down the hall who obviously, he's the guy who's, like, blasting the EDM music in the previous story. And he's got, like, a boot on and a whole 9 yards, and his leg is broken. And I'm like, okay, so I guess he wasn't lying when he was screaming, help, 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 he's breaking my leg. Yeah, he broke his fucking leg. So I see him, and then like maybe 2 or 3 in the afternoon, I hear a guy standing in the hall, like by his door, as my guess. And I just hear the conversation of, "Hey man, I'm sorry about last night. Like I don't know really what got into me." And like, yeah. And I'm thinking to myself, they fucking let him back in the building, like at the same time as the dude he just got in a fist fight with the previous night. Like, what the fuck is going on here, man? That is the weirdest shit. Like, you're gonna let a guy who last night broke a dude's leg at 4:30 in the morning back in the building at the same time as him. Like, wouldn't you tell him, like, hey, you need to get your stuff out of that room, like, you know, and just show up when he's not around, or like tell that guy not to show up at a certain time, the other guy not to be around at that time. But apparently, that's not what happened. So that's pretty much where the story ends. I really don't know who the guy who broke his leg was and what he looked like. I kind of wish I had gone out to see when I heard him talking about it. But I didn't. And it was just the weirdest thing that has ever happened to me. Like, I literally heard a man scream Hail Marys as he broke another dude's fucking leg. And that is just weird as hell. But it's also a story that I love. It was, I mean, honestly, I was even laughing about it by the next morning. Like, it wasn't even one of those, like, oh, it wasn't funny at the time, but now it's funny. No, I thought it was fucking hilarious when it happened. I was like, what the hell is my life right now? But anyway, that's about it for this one.